In this Java video, we're going to be taking a look at how to implement and use 2D arrays, and we're going to be doing that using a treasure hunting game. So we have our main method we're in. Let's jump right in. So we're going to do a couple Boolean values here. Now with a single set of brackets, you create a 1D array. To implement a 2D array, or to declare a 2D array, you make two brackets. You give your 2D array a name. I'm going to call my first one treasure because we're going to make a table and it's going to be a map of, it's going to have rows, it's going to have columns, and I need to determine what row and column of where my treasure is going to be. And there is either treasure there or there's not treasure there. And this is going to be a new Boolean, and I need to set the size of my 2D array. I'm going to do 10 and 10. Now I want to be clear about something right now. If you're coming from another language, you may notice that when you set up your 2D array, that is set up by the max index. In Java, it is not set up by the max index. It is set up by the length of the array. So because we have 10 and 10, our first row is not row 1, it's actually row 0. So we're going to have row 0, then row 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 9, and that will be 10 rows. So it's very important you understand that. Now, we also are going to have a board, and there are a couple options. They have either dug in a certain specific row and column, or they have not. So that's why we have that set up as Boolean. That's going to be a board, and then we're going to make it the same size. So we're going to do 10, and we're going to do 10. Put our semicolon. Now, we're also going to need a game over Boolean value, because when the game's not over, it should keep looping. We want to redraw the board, showing them every time they've where they have dug, whether or not they found treasure, where they have not dug. We want to show them all of that, so we need to update the game board. Well, we don't want to keep typing in code over and over and over. We want our program to do that for us. So we're going to implement a loop. Now we're also going to need row, because we need to know where what row the user wants to search, which means we also need to know the column that they want to search. And then they'll have a certain amount of points, because once they earn 5 points, we're going to make 5 treasure spots. The game is over. Now, because we said we want the user to enter the row, we want the user to enter the column, that means we need to get some input from the user, which means we need to import. And you want to spell import correctly, and that is the Java utility, specifically the scanner. When you have input the scanner, you need to set it up. So we're going to create an object called scanner. We'll use my object, it's one that's commonly used. Scanner, and we're going to do system.in. That means we are getting input from the user. Now the first thing we want to do, because this video is about how to use, manipulate, and set up 2D arrays. When we set these Boolean values up, they're going to be false by default. What we want to do is learn how to work with them. So we're going to show you code, or I'm going to show you code, how to set it up so all of them are defaults. And we do that with a nested for loop. So we're going to do I equals 0. We're initializing that I variable, and we want this loop to run as long as I is less than 10. Because remember, it's based on the length of the array, not the max index of the array. So if we set it I is less than or equal to 10, on the last time it runs, it would crash. We need to increment I. Now, this very next one, what we want to do is we want to create another for loop. And we're going to do j, because I has already been used. We're going to do j is less than 10, and then we're going to increment j. Now, here's what we want to happen. We want to take our treasure. We want to take I, which is the row, j, which is the column, and we want to set it equal to false. That is what we want to do. The first time this loop runs, I is going to be 0. This inner loop is then going to run. I is going to be 0, j is going to be 0. When we hit here, j is still less than 10. It increments, becomes 1. We swing back around. 1 is less than 10, so now I is still 0, j is 1. So in row 0, column 1, we're also going to set it to false. This is going to run 10 times. Once this runs 10 times, we're going to swing back around. I is going to become 1, which is less than 10. This runs for another 10 times. And what that's going to do is it's going to set all every single row and column, wherever they intersect, all 100 spaces on our game board, it's going to set the treasure to false. Now that we've set the treasure to false, we need to make sure that we set some treasure up. Now we're going to do, for testing purposes, we're going to do 1, 1, which means row 1, column 1, we're going to set that to true. We're also going to do that to 2, 2. Now you can choose any spaces you want. The reason I'm doing 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, all the way to 5 is because those are easy numbers to remember. I don't have to guess where my treasure is. I can do some easy testing, and we can always come back later and change this if we want. And if you want to get really fancy, you can even have the user input what row and what column they want the treasure. But let's just stick with what we're learning right now, which are 2D arrays. Now, we have not started our loop yet. All this needs to happen before the game actually begins. The game doesn't begin until the user starts inputting the row and the column. So let's go ahead and let's draw the board for the user, and we're going to do that with a nested for loop. int I, we're going to set that to 0. As long as I is less than 10, this is going to run. We're going to increment I. Now, this is very important. In your outer loop, which is what we have here, we want to go to the next line. So we're going to do system.out.print line. We need to move to the next line. Once we have done that, we can then run this inner loop. And we're going to do J again. And we're going to say as long as J is less than 10, because remember it's based on the size of our array, the length of the array. 10 will not work. We're going to increment J. And here's what we want to do. We want to output a question mark. System.out.print, not print line. If we do print line, it's going to move to the next line. Then we're just going to get a huge list of question marks. That's not what we want. Also, I don't want my question marks right on top of one another, so I put a space. I want it to look somewhat clean. So what we're going to do is we're going to compile. We see there are no errors. What we're going to do now is we're going to run our code, and we're going to make sure it outputs correctly. And it has outputted correctly. Let's talk about what is happening here. So let's take a look at our code. So let's, unmaximize this here. We want to be able to see our code. We want to be able to see our terminal. All right, so here is what we have. There we go. Now we can see everything. So when this outer loop runs right here, I is 0, J is 0. We have print line. We go to the next line. We're saying J is 0. We want to print a question mark. It prints a question mark. This inner loop runs 10 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now that this inner loop is done, we swing back to that outer loop. I becomes 1. System.out.println. What does that mean? That means we move to the next line. It kicks the cursor to the next line. We output 10 more question marks. We loop around to the outer loop. I becomes 2. Kicks us to the next line, and then we output 10 more question marks. So that is what is happening, and that's why it's imperative you use print, not print line. All right, let's get back into our code, and let's continue writing our program. So now that we have the question marks done, we can now start our loop, because we have no idea how many times it's going to take the user to find the treasure, so we need to run a loop. So we're going to do while. And this is our game over variable. Why it is set to false. So why it's set to false, we're going to run some code. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the next line. You don't have to go to the next line. I want to go to the next line just to keep it clean. Now we need to ask the user what row do they want to search, and then what column do they want to search. So let's go ahead and get that from our user. We're just going to ask them what row do you want to search. And then we want to ask them what column do you want to search. Now we need to store that variable, and row is going to be equal to my object dot next int. That is how we get the next integer. Now we called our scanner my object, so that is what we have to use. And then system dot out dot println, and then what column do you want to search. Now you don't have to do row then column. It is common practice. Going back to our 2D array here, this is the row, this is the column. So we want to keep it in that format because that will make us a lot easier trying to code our game. And we're going to do column equals myObject dot next int. So there we go. Now, once they have that, we need to say, okay, they have searched a specific part of the board. So we're going to do board row, board column, and we're going to set that equal to true, meaning they have searched there. Now, if they have searched there, we need to do something. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to do something in a separate method. So let's go ahead and create a new method. This is going to be public static because we are not using objects, void because it's not going to return anything, and we're going to simply call it update board. So I'm going to call it update board. You can call it whatever you want, but because this updates the board, that's a good choice. Now, let's talk about the parameters. So we want to pass down the current board. We need to know where they've searched. We need to pass down the treasure so we know where the treasure is. We need to pass down the row they searched and the column they searched as well. Actually, we don't need to pass down the row and the column because we handle that up here. So really all we need to do is pass down the board and the treasure. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Boolean, and you want to be inside the parentheses here. So Boolean, and we need to pass down a 2D array. So we need to let the computer know it's a 2D array, and we're going to call it up board, which simply means update board. And then I'm going to have another Boolean value, which was a 2D array, passing down the treasure. There we go. We don't need the row and the column. So then what we want to do is we want to clear the console when we call this method. We don't want to have repeats of the map. What we want to do is we want to clear the console, clear the terminal, and then draw the new map updated, showing where they have searched, where they have found treasure, where they have not found treasure, and where they haven't searched. So let's go ahead and do that now. Here's how you do that. You're going to do system.out.print. Now, you're going to put single quotation marks there. All right, just a apostrophe, if you will. And then we're going to do a /. Now, that is right above the, that is actually a backslash. That is right above the enter key. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do a lowercase u, 3 zeros, and then a C. And what that will tell is capital C. And what that will tell BlueJ is, hey, we're going to clear the terminal. So it's going to just flush it all out. We need a nested for loop to handle, to update the board. So we're going to do for int_i equals 0. And this is going to run while I is less than 10. And then we're going to increment I. Now remember, with the outer loop, you want to go to the next line. So we're going to do system.out.print line. And we're just going to simply go to the next line. We don't want a bunch of question marks in a row. We only want 10. Then we're going to do our inner loop, and that is going to be j equals 0. And that is going to be j is less than 10. We're going to increment j. Now, inside this nested for loop, there are 3 possibilities. They have searched a location. That's it. They searched a location. Or they searched a location and have found treasure. They searched a location and have or have not found treasure, whichever one I didn't say, and they haven't searched an area yet. The first thing we're going to do is, let's say they've searched there and there is treasure. So if that is a possibility, we're going to do upboard, because that is our array that's been passed down. We're going to do I. We're going to do j. If that is true, and the treasure is true, then they have found treasure. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to mark that with an X. So we're going to do system.out.print, and we're just going to put, we're going to put an X there. And I'm going to put a space. I want to keep everything looking uniformed. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is that they search and do not find treasure. So upboard, I, j, that's the row and the column they searched. And remember, above in the main method, we set that equal to true. Right back up here, we said where we got the row and the column. We set equal to true to show they have searched there. And that's going to be passed down to up board. So that's what we're checking. So if we're saying, hey, they have searched there and there is no treasure, so treasure I, J, the row in the column, if that is equal to false, then there is no treasure. We want to show an empty hole there. There's nothing inside the hole they dug, so we can do that with a 0. Then there's one other possibility, and that is they have not searched an area yet. And then what we want to do is we want to say, hey, you haven't searched here, and we do that with a question mark. Now, if you were watching, I just typed in print.line. You have to be very, very careful. It's very, very easy to make a syntax mistake. All right, that should take care of it. Let's go back to our main method, and let's call this thing. And we're picking up right where we left off. Once this method gets called, or once this runs, the method will get called, and then it will return. But we need to call that method. Our method is called updateBoard. I am not setting it equal to anything, and that is because it is a void method. It's not returning a value. So we're going to do updateBoard, and we have to pass down the board, and we need to pass down treasure. So once we pass down the board and treasure, which is our 2D arrays, the method will run, and it will take care of everything that we just coded. Now, here's the thing. If treasure, the row that they searched, the column that they searched, if it contains treasure, we need to update our treasure by 1, which we called user points, and that's going to be incremented by 1. Now, if you're not familiar with compound statements, this plus equals means user points equals user points plus 1, and we're going to put our semicolon. Now, we have to also check to make sure they don't have 5 points, because if they have 5 points, the game's over. So let's do that. So if user points hits 5, if it becomes equal to 5, then what we're going to do is we're going to let them know that they have 1, that all the treasure has been found. So we'll just say all treasure found. Then what we're going to do is not only that, we're going to set game over to true, and that will end the game. And then what I want to do is, it's possible that they haven't gotten 5 points yet, so I'll do system.out.println just to give everything a little bit of space, make it a little easier to read, and then I'm going to output how many points they have, and say points, put a space, and then we're going to say, we're going to tack on the user points. So that should work. The only thing left to do is test our code. Now, if it doesn't work, that's okay. We'll come back and we'll look for our syntax errors. So let's go ahead and run this thing and let's see what happens. So we know where our treasure is. What row do you want to search? So I know that it's going to be in 1-1. So I want to search row 1, which is this row right here, column 1, which is right here. Now, we should see an X because we have searched there and treasure has been found there, and we see an X. Perfect. Now let's search a row and column where there isn't treasure, and we should see a capital O. So row 0, which is right here, and I want to search column 9, which is right here at the end. And we see a capital O. There's no treasure there. We can also see where we haven't searched. What about row 2, column 2? Boom. There's treasure. What about row 3, column 3? There is treasure. Row 4, column 4. There is treasure. Let me test another row. How about row 7, column 7? No treasure there. Now you might be saying, well, hold on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's column 8. Don't forget, it starts with 0. This is column 0, column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, column 6, column 7. This is row 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's why it looks that way. You got to keep that in mind. Let's do 6 and 1. We can see there is no treasure there. And then what we also need to do is we need to check and make sure that the last one works. So what we're going to do here is we are going to type in the last coordinate 5, 5. which is the last treasure, we should get a message saying all treasure found, and we should be able to exit the loop. And we do. We're able to close our program now. It is no longer running. All treasure found, points are equal to 5. That is how you implement and use 2D arrays. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. Help the channel grow as I add more and more videos. We'll see you guys in the next one.